Reports of children recalling past lives have existed throughout history. But are those so-called memories real? Dr. Ian Stevenson, a Canadian doctor, university professor, and psychiatrist, has investigated 3,000 cases of children who claim to remember having lived a previous life. In his book, European Cases of the Reincarnation Type Europe, he describes one of the most intriguing and perhaps most well-known cases of the phenomenon of reincarnation, the case of twins Jennifer and Gillian Pollock, who not only bore physical characteristics of their deceased twin sisters, but were also able to recount experiences, likes and dislikes, and even locations visited while they were their former selves.
And in her well-received books, Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven, Carol Bowman, a past life therapist near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, recounts true cases from her over 30-year career. One in point is the strange story of a young Courtney Perasco, who recalled not only her past life, but also remembered what happens between lives. Most amazing of all is that young Courtney was able to recall meeting God, and was even able to describe to her family what happens when we die. In this episode, we'll explore the details that make up these two strange cases, and ponder the question, are past lives a real occurrence? Thanks for joining us today on the Supernatural Tendencies Podcast. I'm Christy.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 6, Past Lives Remembered.
John and Florence Pollock had made a pretty decent life for themselves. Living in 1950s England, Hexham to be specific, their successful grocery and milk delivery service had afforded them a life of modest comfort, prosperity, and joy. Even more so, the couple had 2 daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, ages 11 and 6, who could have been said to be very close, inseparable even. Their picturesque lives would forever be changed, though, on May 7th, 1957. The family, along with a friend of the children's named Anthony, traveled to a nearby town to attend their regular Sunday Mass. As John pulled up to the church, the children, in a hurry to get inside and save the family seats, jumped out of the car and ran blindly into the street.
In an instant, all 3 children were hit and killed by a local woman who claimed she never even saw them. The woman, in a bid to commit suicide, attempted to take a mix of prescription drugs to complete the task. Onlookers described the children as flying like cricket balls through the air. The Pollock girls were killed instantly, while Anthony would later succumb to his injuries at the hospital. The family was devastated. With a life filled with possibility and enthusiasm suddenly ripped away from her, Florence fell into a deep depression. John, on the other hand, attempted to console her by various strange proclamations that they would have their daughters back. He would go as far to say that he and his wife would have another set of girls, and soon.
Everyone took these predictions as the ramblings of a grief-stricken parent attempting to cope with such a life-altering loss, especially considering that John's devout Catholic faith would, in theory, make it difficult for them to get Joanna and Jacqueline back. Yet, he still insisted. Much to everyone's surprise, a year later the couple would give birth to twin girls. While still skeptical, Florence couldn't help remember John's predictions, this being one of them, that this would be how they'd get their children back.
Soon after the girls turned 3 years old, their parents noticed that they were able to remember past events in the lives of their deceased sisters that they could not have known. They knew people from the village that they had never met before. They had the same manner of speaking and eating that their sisters had. The girls began asking for toys that they had never seen, that had belonged to their late sisters.
On one occasion, the girls found dolls that had belonged to their sisters and knew which doll had belonged to whom, and also correctly identified the dolls' names. The girls even shared scars and birthmarks on their bodies that also belonged to their deceased sisters. Jennifer had small marks on her nose in the same place where the late Jacqueline had had 3 stitches. Jillian had a small mole on the left side of her waist that her late sister Joanna had.
On another occasion, their mother heard them discussing the accident that took the lives of their sisters in graphic detail. They described the blood that filled their noses and mouth, and how horrible and scary it was, and that they couldn't breathe. The girls also shared a terrible fear of vehicles, and would scream and hold on to their parents if one even came near them. When the girls turned 5 years old, the kite string seemed to pop. All memories of their perceived former lives faded. No more connections, no more familiar places or items. All gone, as if they had not happened to the girls at all. They were now fleeting memories, now gone, never to manifest again.
Did these girls just experience projections from their grieving parents? In their dismay, could have John and Florence have seen what they wanted to see, no matter how fantastic? Or did the circumstances properly come together to allow both Joanna and Jacqueline to come back to this reality as their own sisters, Jillian and Jennifer?
Next is the mysterious case of a young girl named Courtney Perasco. By all accounts, Courtney was a happy, normal child, and it wasn't until age 3 that she began telling her parents about her life before she was Courtney. While sitting with her mother at the kitchen table, she looked up from scribbling on a piece of paper and said, "I miss my Grandma Alice so much." Confused, her mother asked her who Grandma Alice was, since she already had 2 grandmothers, neither of which were named Alice.
The little girl replied, "I know. Alice was my grandma before I was Courtney." She said she lived with her grandparents after her parents had died, and that her grandma loved her and always used to play board games with her and letting her win. Courtney giggled as she told her mother the story. She remembered and was able to remember her past life very clearly.
She also remembered that her grandma had died when she was 16 years old. She then sighed, and again she said that she missed her Grandma Alice so much, to which her mother replied that she was glad that Courtney was there with her now. Courtney answered that she knew her mother loved her, and that's why she had chosen her, and that Grandma Alice had also recommended her as her new mother on Earth.
Mrs. Perasco was very uncomfortable with her daughter's past life stories, and would always try to change the subject whenever Courtney would bring up any further details. Courtney recounted her life with Grandma Alice, including that there were hills and trees where they lived, and that the trees lost their leaves before the cold winters, not warm winters like in Louisiana. One day while in the bath, Courtney said that there had been no bath at Grandma Alice's house, and they had to use an outhouse as a bathroom. It wasn't until years later that her grandfather bought and installed a working indoor toilet.
While looking at baby photos, her little brother asked her older sister, Aubrey, where she had been when a photo of himself and Courtney was taken. When Aubrey gave the explanation that she was in heaven waiting to be born, Courtney corrected her with what really happens. As soon as you arrive in heaven, you are allowed to rest for a while. Then you have to return to work. You have to think about what you want to learn in your next life on Earth. Then you choose a family that will help you learn what you have decided to learn. Her mother then asked her if she had seen God, to which she said that she had only seen him with her soul.
At 6 years old, Courtney saw a mother on TV who was crying for her son, who was sentenced to death for a crime he'd committed. Courtney told her mother that the woman didn't need to cry because her son's death was not a punishment. He had messed his life up and has been given another chance to begin a new life as a baby with his new family in order to learn things he needs to learn. As with most cases of past lives remembered by children, Courtney's memories faded by the time she was 7 years old, and as far as we've been able to research, went on to have a normal life.
But the question remains, was this young girl truly able to recall in detail the experiences from her former life? Or is this just a tale dreamed up by a very imaginative child?
Up today with the craziest headache. Just thumping. Like a European nightclub. Like a disco in my head. Yeah. Yeah, it was terrible.
It's like that commercial with the pig.
Yeah, I didn't even necessarily find a reason why I had it. I just popped some IBs and tried to call it a morning, but it was pretty...
We're not advocating for drug use on this podcast.
Ibuprofen.
I know.
If taken in moderation.
If taken in moderation.
It's fine. I took 2 ibuprofen. Only 2.
Only 2.
I know some people take like 5 of them suckers.
Yeah, that's Daryl.
It's crazy. 5 of them. Okay, so what do we got today?
We are talking about past lives. 2 particular cases in particular.
2, and these are the stories that you kind of like too, huh? The past lives one.
I love them.
And hopefully we'll be able to do a few more forays into past lives. We wanted to kind of just pare it down to just 2 for today.
I have a ton in waiting.
Okay.
They're just lying there waiting. They're like, pick me, coach.
So this episode is really a part 1.
Of many.
And we're trying to spread them out, though. Make it kind of a variety, from week to week, as opposed to having big, long streaks with the same subject.
Exactly. So. And there are more cases of past lives popping up every single day.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Okay, so today we had the 2 we had. The first set was...
Jennifer and Jillian Pollock.
Yep, the twins.
Pollock twins.
Yep, the twins from England.
Very sad.
Yes,
very
it
sad.
Was. I suppose most of these stories have to be relatively sad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain amount of somber feeling in recollection of an old life. I mean, we'll get into the other story, but this one more so from the parents and then the outsider's point of view than, and I'm going to do this the entire time. Before their names were Joanne and Jacqueline. And then afterwards it was Jillian and
Jennifer.
So, not so much somber feeling from Jillian and Jennifer other than when they would remember the actual incident.
Right? Yeah, and that's very sad.
Mm-hmm.
And typically in most cases of past lives, they do have memories of, if they having died horrifically or, and remembering that.
Yeah. Now, but see, what I didn't exactly, find it in the research on this one is any of their, they were like 3 or 4, right? So any of their 3-year-old mentality of, I miss this, or, I wish I still had this. It was more of like an identification thing, right? Like, oh, that used to be my doll, or
exactly.
That doll's name was blah, blah, blah.
When reading through the actual case, for instance, when they had recollections of their dolls, that had the dolls had belonged to their deceased sisters, and the mother was actually upstairs in the attic, and of course all of these items from the deceased sisters were boxed up, and but you still want to keep them, and so Jillian and Jennifer had never seen any of these items, so the mother was upstairs just kind of going through them and trying to decide what she should keep, cleaning out the attic. And
as one normally does.
Yes, and the girls immediately said, "Oh, those are our dolls." And then they gave the names of the dolls, and then they each took their, "Oh, this is your doll. This is my doll." They knew who the dolls had belonged to, that they had belonged to them in their previous life.
Yeah.
So I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And they would go, as we said before, they would go on car rides to towns that they had never been to, but that the deceased sisters had.
Yeah.
And they would literally tell their parents, okay, turn here, to get to this person's house. And, so that's pretty amazing. How would children, especially of that age, I mean, like, I remember when you and your brother were little, like, you were probably 10 before you figured out how to get to Walmart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having a 3 or a 4-year-old be able to give you correct directions on how to get somewhere, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then once they turned 5, it kind of stopped, right? It was like an abrupt stop. It wasn't necessarily kind of
in
like
their case
like a decrescendo of you told me about this a month ago. Could you tell me again? And the story gets less and less detailed until finally gone. It was like a
abrupt halt. Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Like a threshold.
Yeah.
Almost.
What I find particularly fascinating, though, is, call it intuition, call it some type of psychic ability, but John having that sense and being able to predict that his, was that what it was? Was it a prediction type of thing where he just knew that his daughters would come back to him? Or was it more of, you're stating it as though it's fact and, that it's going to happen? Or was it more of, I hope the girls come back to us?
Yeah.
I guess in either way, he was right.
Now, with the overall idea on past lives, okay? And this may be kind of different from maybe how can I even begin to voice what's in my head? Like as with extraterrestrials and everything, right? There aren't whole religions necessarily that have been around for thousands of years that kind of explicitly talk about the things that we're kind of talking about today. And I don't want to start another discussion on that because I'm sure that can be debated.
Yeah.
But within the scope of an afterlife that most religions do address, and they have addressed since humanity has had the time to sit and kind of contemplate their existence, is there any other way of thinking about it, like explanations as to with John in that regard? Like, is there any way to affirm with kind of a common thinking that's kind of commonplace throughout these stories that would kind of lead in an answer for John in that area? Did he hope for it and it happened, or did he predict it? Is there something in the common thinking now that kind of helps explain that experience for John? Does that make sense?
Not that I can really for sure say,
Mm-hmm.
I guess one way or the other. You know what it really reminds me of? And, though I'm, they were obviously Catholic, but, it reminds me of like the, is it the Hindu monks? I believe. The Tibetan monks.
Okay.
That, how do I want to say this? That, they put themselves into that, like they almost caused their deaths. They are walled up inside this, for lack of a better word, a tomb, and then they're not given any food or water. And then after after so many days, of course, they die, and then they're mummified and everything. But it really reminds me of that, how they have like, in their religion, their way of thinking is that there is absolutely no doubt that they will return again as another monk. Like there's no question that that's what they believe. And so then they look for, even in cases of like, look at the Dalai Lama, whenever one passes, they immediately begin looking for the next reincarnation of the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, but the way that we kind of explain it in the script and the way you're kind of voicing it to me is that it's kind of unclear whether or not
which one it was for John. I know
for John, yeah,
and that's definitely not something I don't think. I'm not all that familiar with the Catholic religion.
Yeah,
but I don't think that reincarnation really. I don't think that's a staple
really
of Catholicism.
No, with a lot of Christianity, especially whatever kind of variety you ascribe to, most likely you're not coming back. I mean, you have
you die and you go to heaven or hell or wherever.
And then with Catholicism, you have like limbo or purgatory, which technically are two different places.
Yeah.
Okay? We won't get into the theology of that. I don't think that's pertinent for this discussion. Regardless, don't foresee. I kind of see it being in direct opposition.
Yeah, I think so too.
With his faith,
which is odd though, because they, by all accounts, they were devout Catholics. So I don't know, was his link to his daughters just that strong that even in death, he was able to get that confirmation that said, we will come back to you.
Yeah.
Was it that type of thing? And I'm really led to believe that, because like I said, with them being the devout Catholics, I don't.
I would be remiss to not at least bring up that sometimes it kind of happens, and this is not an accusatory statement, even though it may kind of sound like that people across all forms of life, cultures, religions, geographic areas tend to sometimes cherry pick what they kind of want and need for their emotional states right now. So not necessarily pointing a finger at John in this, in coming outside of his Catholic thinking of what Catholics maybe normally would be taught. This is possibly maybe what he needed.
Yeah,
despite what scriptures had said, he felt so strongly that they would get them back.
Yeah.
And I guess in this case, one could argue that they did get them back.
They did.
So despite the ins and outs of the debates rather that one could have with most facets of this story, if it indeed is for sure, and we wouldn't have this episode of this podcast if it was like for sure certain.
But put yourself in what was his wife's name, Florence. Put yourself in her shoes. You've just lost your twin daughters in a horrific fashion, and then you have your husband saying, we're going to get the girls. They will come back to us. I mean, can you just? I'm sure Florence probably thought that John was off his rocker. I mean, considering the time, 1957, I think it was.
Yeah.
Considering that time, considering they are devout Catholics, and now you've got your husband saying something like that. I mean, I'm sure Florence probably felt like her whole world was just like totally crumbling.
Oh, I mean,
I can't even imagine.
I think maybe without having Florence here to actually ask her what she thought, I mean, one could possibly think the opposite too, though. I mean, you have your partner who is supposed to be, your husband, your spouse, obviously, to be next to you, to support you in your life and everything that happens, the events that happened, and no one accounts for something like this. I mean, anything that you could most likely grasp at to make you feel better, even if for a moment, I'm sure is going to be welcomed. And even if she actually didn't think that this was actually going to happen, I mean, maybe it would at least
find some type of solace,
especially some type of solace, and to have the story play out like it did, at least the way that we've researched it. I mean, maybe it did happen for a reason, and maybe they got their daughters back.
And you could even, as far as visiting different places that they had been in their previous lives, or even the episode with the toys, remembering the dolls and everything. Now, you can discount that. Let's just take that off the table. But when you have actual birthmarks and physical scars that have been carried over now to this new set of twins, and then the mole, and things like that, how are you possibly going to discount that?
Yeah. And
then to take it even a step further, on the occasion when their mother heard them discussing, in graphic detail, how the former twins had died. I hate to say it, but tasting the blood and having that intense fear of vehicles. I mean, I don't see any other possibility other than to say that, hey, these girls were definitely a product of reincarnation.
I will venture not quite in the opposite, but still, as I try to do, play the logical course of action here. For the listeners, I have two children. I have a girl and a boy. They are currently 7 and 5. No. Wow, they just had birthdays.
Yeah.
8 and 6.
8 and
Sorry,
6.
Just had birthdays, 8 and 6. And so obviously both of them were 4 at some point in time. And especially my son, Saxon, would just go off on tangents, even if you'd give him one little bit of information. What he would do was, he still kind of does this. It's very interesting. If you would say, "Do you remember that time you went to the store And that in itself is a very vague question. You
Yeah.
remember that time you went to the store? How many times has one been to a store? Even if you were 4, and he would go, "Oh yeah, that one time at Walmart," and he questions it, and he'll wait for you to say yes or no as like an acceptance to move the story on.
Give him a lead.
So yeah, what you say? Yeah, so yeah, it was at Walmart. Oh, that one time where I threw the toy? No, not that time you threw the toy. And he goes, "Oh, okay, the time I picked the cereal off the shelf? Oh yeah, that time." And then it slowly kind of goes ahead and ahead and ahead. And we have a very active kitten in here today.
Sorry, guys.
It's okay. We will get through this with Oscar being persistent. So I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but it would. I don't know how to say it without sounding like, wow, he is getting into everything.
And I get what you're saying. I totally understand that. But again, it almost takes you kind of leading him, and then he looks to you for confirmation one way or the other if, what direction to go with his story. But especially in this case, I'm sure that the parents didn't discuss in detail the graphic details that, of the former twins, how they died. Well, so being able to recount memories like that.
Not directly with them, I would imagine not directly with them, but what if they were telling another person or something, or overheard somebody else in another room?
That could be.
And they're just recounting the story they heard through the wall or something.
But would that be something that, that if you had lost children or a child to something in this terrible manner, you wouldn't then say that, the blood filled their mouth. You wouldn't go on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You wouldn't go in that graphic of detail.
I don't mean to sound nitpicky right now, but from the articles that we read, those were not in quotations. Those words were not in quotations. Yeah. So there is a possibility that was the writer explaining what they were talking about in his or her words.
That could be.
So there could have been some artistic rendition taken there. You know what I mean? Artistic. Why can I not think of that phrase? Artistic liberties taken.
Yeah.
With how the children worded it. I mean, sometimes you do that, almost like a translate. If you have like another parent come over and bring their kids over, sometimes their kids will speak in a manner, maybe using different words, or maybe they have a bit of a speech impediment at a certain age that you can't quite understand them. So they'll come up, "Hey, Uncle Alex, blah, 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 blah."
Yeah.
And then you kind of like, what? And then so most of the time, I know we used to try to do this, especially with Saxon, because he's got a kind of an S sound issue, that the other person would be like, what? And most of the time they kind of look at you as the parent like, what did he say? And then you kind of translate, oh, he wants to know if you have the kitten who is currently on my leg or something like that, And then the person obviously goes, oh, okay, yeah, he's right over there. So I'm not, again, I keep backtracking and saying I'm not necessarily saying this, but with a lot of these, there could be other avenues. There could be. A lot of coincidences, though, they can't happen too often. Coincidences can't happen too often. So if there are verifiable coincidences, I mean, coincidences do happen, but they shouldn't happen too often, because then if they happen too often, it's probably not true.
And so could you then chalk the marks that the one girl had on her nose from her sister having stitches, or the mole, or the birthmarks?
Well, let me say this right up front. Personally, can I say anything about him? No, because I'd never personally seen him.
Well, no, but
I didn't see him on the previous twins. I didn't see him on the current twins, so I can't say that really. If we go off of the story, that's a very interesting fact. It is. What I will say for certain, though, is this type of story with the past lives, and this is kind of why we want to do different installments on them. I find it most interesting that this is a reoccurring thing. It's a story that keeps coming up and is pervasive throughout history, whether it's a small little story or it's a very long and in-depth story. It does keep popping up. And for me, anything that keeps happening tends to have a grain of truth in it.
Yeah.
You can only fake something, or you can only lie so many times, or take something out of context so many times before it's realized as what it is. So having so many of these with what I would imagine would be non-scientific ways of disproving them, such as what I'm doing, and saying that, well, it could be this, or well, it could be that, because that's what I'm doing. But essentially, having that balance of not certainty and certainty in the middle of both of those kind of keep this going for me. It really does.
I think you always have to have that, though.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think of all the cases, though, from a UK standpoint, I believe that this is actually the most well documented and well known past life case in the UK. So that's very interesting to note there, too.
It is. Yeah, it is.
So moving on to the next case here, the case of Courtney Perasco.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with this one before we started this.
Just love this case.
Yeah?
Loved it.
What about it?
Well, a few different components, actually. I absolutely loved the fact that her grandma Alice came through to her and that she was able to identify that her grandma Alice helped her pick out her her mother in this life and helped her with with what she wanted to learn coming back into this life.
Yeah.
So
a little more in depth than the twins.
Yeah.
While the twins being a little more recollecting things that had happened in the previous life. This Courtney Perasco, right? Perasco actually went in depth into the afterlife aspect of it all.
Yes. And apparently she would talk about her former life like all the time.
Really?
From, I believe it was the age of 3 until she was, I can't remember how old she was here, 6 years old. So, I mean, she talked about this former life constantly. And, it made her mother very uncomfortable, because they also were very religious. And she just didn't have any answers. So she would try to kind of divert Courtney's attention away from, whenever she would start talking about this past life, her mother would say, oh, that's nice. Now, how about we come over here and do this, and try to just keep her from talking about it because she just didn't know what to say in response, which, is totally understandable.
So it wasn't that she was necessarily opposed to it or something like that.
No. It made her uncomfortable. She just, didn't know what to say. And I'm sure it probably did kind of scare her. I would have to admit, if I didn't know that much about past lives, and you don't hear many people speaking of them. Most people, especially, I'm not sure what year this is.
I was just going to ask you that, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't say actually. But yeah, most people don't go around saying, hey, guess what I did in a past life? Yeah. So understandably it would make her feel kind of weird.
Sorry, now for our listeners who actually want to look this up on their own, I keep making my patented I'll post a link from the show notes comment, but even as I kind of do a quick search here to get reminded, I can't find anything other than
it is, let me get back up here to the top.
I get like name searches.
It's hard to find information on. If you would like to find out more about this case and perhaps more other cases of past lives, Carol Bowman is a past life therapist near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she has written at least 2 books that I know of because she does work with children that have had these experiences.
Oh, okay.
So you can check out either of her books, and like I said, she very well could have more.
Okay.
But the name of those, again, her name is Carol Bowman, Bowman, and the books are Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven. So if that is something that interests you, then...
Yep, and she comes right up on the Google search, too.
Yeah, you could probably find them on Amazon.
Yep, she is not affiliated with neither you nor I. So
no.
Not plugging her for any nefarious reason.
No, definitely not.
It's for some reason, it's just kind of, in general, kind of difficult to find for something for Courtney Perasco. So if you are definitely interested, I see a book right here. Is it The Children's Past Lives, you said?
Yes.
It's available in paperback, sold in Target. So if you have a Target near you.
Target.
Yes, for $7.59. I imagine it would be maybe around the same price, possibly on Amazon. I am not up on the whole ebook thing, so I don't know how pricing works for that.
No, I don't either.
If you are, then I'd imagine you know more than I how much it may cost for the ebook.
Yeah, but check it out. You know, if that interests you, check it out. I
have not read that book. We kind of split this up this week. I kind of did the Pollock twins, and you kind of did the Perasco case. So I'll have to dig into that because that's interesting.
I would love to read those books.
I'm more intrigued by the fact that I can't find anything on a Google search about it.
Yeah.
And there's part of Miss Bowman's book is dedicated to it, so she's kept that information on lock.
I know.
So now I gotta buy the book. Miss Carol, good job.
Yeah.
Now I gotta buy your book.
And in a lot of these cases too, I've noticed that for the most part, I mean, you do have some cases where you find out, well, okay, what happened to them, but with both of these cases, their memories faded, and as far as we know, they went on to have completely normal lives.
Yeah, almost like a layover period.
Yeah,
where there's kind of a blending of the new and the old, and it's kind of like a veil of uncertainty of what's happening now until they reach that certain age where it becomes a little more concrete that this is what's happening now.
And then a shift kind of takes place. Yep. Okay, we're in this life now. Let's let go of that old life.
And you said that's kind of a common occurrence across all these?
Yep. It is. You find that more often than not. Now, there are a few cases where they have been able to retain those memories. But for the most part, it's something that does eventually fade. Mm-hmm. And you're left with not having those memories.
Interesting. So do you think that this is going to continue? Do you think that we're going to, year by year, have more and more stories about this?
I believe so. I definitely do. And I've said this before, too. I think more and more, it seems to me more and more children are being born, for lack of a better term, spiritually awakened. I know that I see it in my grandchildren, in your children. And just, there are so many, I'm trying to think of the word that I want to use here. Children are born so much smarter than they were, even just in the 47 years that I've been around.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems totally different. Yeah. And so I don't know, if there is something happening behind the scenes. I don't know, but it just seems like more, we're hearing more and more of these cases of where children are remembering having these past life memories. Mm-hmm. And, maybe it is due to something happening behind the scenes, or maybe it is due to, just a sign of the times. It's okay to talk about this kind of thing now. You look back in, like in the case of the Pollock twins, the 1950s, early 60s, 70s, even into the 80s and 90s, you didn't really hear too much about things like this, And I think especially in the case of Courtney Perasco, I think it was that her mother actually, due to these memories and having that wanting to help her child and wanting to figure out what was exactly going on, that Courtney's mother sought out the help of Mrs. Bowman. And so, I don't know what exactly, again, we'd have to read the book. Yeah. But did they do some type of hypnosis regression on her as a child to maybe help facilitate that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So we would probably have to read the book.
Yep.
And now find out.
And now that we kind of got into the thick of it, it reminds me of my daughter. I kind of mentioned them before, but my daughter Ember, who is now 8, and I can't exactly remember how old she was when this kind of first started, but she had a pretty interesting story that I tell about how a person kind of comes into how they feel about the world, if kind of given some leeway. I hesitate to say that everybody has this kind of opportunity to be able to kind of formulate these things at a younger age without being reprimanded in some way. Some people are into families that, this is scripture. And I'm not speaking to any religion in particular, just whatever your scripture may be. This is how the world works. This is how gods work. This is how people work. And this is the way you need to understand things. I've always led my children's lives giving them kind of bumper guidances, but not directing them to anything. I am not religious myself. I was raised non-denominational Christian, kind of hopping back and forth from various, denominations. So that's kind of why I just consider myself non-denominational growing up. I have had some experiences growing up that have since turned me away from Christianity as a whole, which ultimately I would assume psychologically made me kind of want to go to college the way I did and for what I did, which was religious studies and history, but coming from the point of view of a non-religious person. Okay. That being said, whenever some things kind of came up within the family, because not everybody shares that same sentiment as I do, they are Christian, commonplace rural Christian for the United States. They would kind of answer her questions with a little more straightforward answers from their understanding of their beliefs. What happens when people die? Well, they go to heaven. And what happens if they're good? They go to heaven, I should say. Or if they're bad, well, then they're punished and they go to hell. With that being said, the one day we were driving, and I say we as if I were there. I was not there. It was my wife driving my daughter Ember, and apparently Ember had asked a question. I can't exactly remember what prompted the conversation, but eventually led around to my wife asking Ember how she viewed what happened when you die. And essentially Ember's worldview revolved around mothers. So everybody needs a mom. Everybody needs a mother to take care of you and to feed you and to clothe you and to make sure that you become a good person. And my wife goes, well, that's interesting. And so what happens when you die? And the idea is that whether you're a mommy or a daddy, you go to another place to wait for another kid so that you could be a mommy or a daddy again to those kids who needs a mommy or a daddy. So me being the analytical self, kind of blending that kind of like a reincarnation feel with not a reason to learn, but a reason to help.
Yeah.
A kind of mentality with my daughter, who I believe was maybe 4 or 5 at the time. And this would not necessarily have been something that was expressly told to her. So it was a very interesting, kind of focusing on mothers. So in my line of study would have been more of like a Celtic belief of the mother, of the maiden, the mother, the crone, centering the world, because everybody needs a mommy, and regardless of whether you're a male or a female, a mommy or a daddy, you're still needed for kids who need a mommy or a daddy. But for her, the center point, the importance of it is that kids all need mommies. So when you die, then you go to a place where you get assigned another child or something of the sort.
Huh.
Yep. So it wasn't necessarily what I would have. It kind of blindsided me because it's not necessarily the devout heaven hell explanation, which I no doubt when I wasn't around she had been told.
Yes.
And to set that point in, my wife always asks herself whether or not she wants to answer a question for Ember or whether she wants to send her to dad. There is a risk and reward for sending her to dad, because she is going to probably get a history lesson. She is probably going to get at least 3 ways other religions view the questions she's asking.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to span the spectrum of going from Satanism all the way to Islam, back to Hindu. I don't mind doing that, because for me, growing up Christian and going to these different churches, if you didn't believe that, then something is kind of wrong, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not your question hasn't been answered properly, that's a problem with you. Whether or not you are not adhering to a certain maybe tenet or something, that could be a problem with the church. However those views may be, manifesting in your life. I really wanted to give her, and I still want to give her, the range of explanations to what speaks to her.
Exactly.
In a way I hold myself to the same standard of every other person, every other belief that I kind of can sit back and say and nitpick. But that is in itself kind of cherry picking, a cherry picking explanation. What makes sense to you? What blah, blah, blah to you? And that's essentially what a lot of people tend to do. And that's kind of like one of my biggest pet peeves with some of scriptural evidence, whatever religion you may be. Maybe you pick this because it makes sense to you, to your values, to your morals, on what you were raised in, but not necessarily that other thing that's 2 sentences later.
Exactly.
And that's kind of, like I said, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, while I'm still kind of doing that to my own children. So if I'm going to hold myself to the same standard, that's what I'm doing. But the ultimate thing for me, and I say this all the time, is I haven't yet been given the gift of faith, because I honestly believe that is a gift, to have a reliance on something that you don't necessarily need to question. That, and I guess I shouldn't even say need to question, because that is a kind of
question,
a thing that you tend to struggle with sometimes. But to have a path that's at least, how can I word that a little more clearly? To have a path that's a little better laid out than just a series of different roads that I kind of view myself on. I don't ascribe to anyone, but I love to learn about each one. I love the somebody may be offended by me using this term, but like the mythology of each one, the folklore of each one, because I believe there are values and lessons to be learned across the board. Because that's how we as a species convey different things to the generations.
Yeah.
It's through ideas, it's through morals, and each moral and idea could have been an answer to a question at one point in time. Mm-hmm. And things do evolve. So maybe we do need to rethink some of these answers to the questions that maybe we've kind of solved, maybe, at least in part from way back when, but still, they still hold merit and value to the overall ethics of how maybe we should live and learn, but aren't necessarily tied to how we should act as people, maybe not necessarily being told to do so because a God may view that as bad. And I know that was kind of a long explanation, but that kind of goes to show for me what kind of hit home for me, because I like to ride that line of, I really want to believe in everything, especially with this past lives thing. Yeah. With Sasquatch, with extraterrestrials. My mind automatically wants to believe in something, no matter how fantastical it tends to sound on the onset. The other half of me is completely logical. Can this happen from my experience? The way the world works and operates and moves from what I've seen, does this story fit into that?
Yeah. That's always the big question.
Yep. And so I rationalize it by that story of Ember with the mommies and daddies going back to get other kids because everybody needs a mommy and daddy. And that was a truly kind of moving experience for me, because like I said, nobody had told her that specifically. I can't speak in certainties that someone didn't tell her that, but I cannot see someone telling her that even when I wasn't around.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a specific thing.
It is.
And I've never heard anybody around me ever voice any of that idea that they might have had before besides her. Yeah. And she was so young, 4 or 5, and that's how the world made sense to her. And that may change. We're people. Experiences do change us, and that her idea may change. But it's interesting to know that the base instinct for this 4 or 5-year-old little girl was derivative of her life revolving around a mommy.
Yeah.
And the way she spoke, she needs to be a mommy, because all kids need mommies. Mm-hmm. Maybe not necessarily having kids of her own, maybe adopting or whatever. And I'm definitely speaking for her on this one.
Yeah.
but that was her goal, that she needs to be a mommy.
Yeah.
Because her mommy took care of her. There's going to be someone who needs her to be a mommy for them.
So it's a role that she needs to assume.
Yep.
She will someday assume.
Yep. Like a teacher, a guide, a guide, a person to help. And the vernacular for her 4 or 5-year-old self was a mommy. Because what is, I say this because one of my favorite movies is The Crow with Brendan Lee.
Yeah.
Remember that movie, The Crow?
I've actually never seen it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good movie. It's kind of a niche movie though. Like you kind of have to kind of dig that kind of thing, because it's kind of dark. The whole idea is kind of dark, but there's a quote from that movie, and as much as I talk myself up into saying how much I love the movie, I may misquote it just a bit. But there's a scene where this woman who has a child in the next room is, I believe she's gonna shoot up heroin, and she's got the tourniquet on, ready to shoot it, and Brandon Lee as the Crow, who is this like vigilante anti-hero, comes in and stops her, and I hope I can remember the line perfectly, but it was "Mother is the name of God on the lips of children." And that's very much true.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of, if you're raised in a religious family, the mother will tend to kind of instill their belief in their own God into their children. But essentially, God doesn't directly give you cereal in the morning before school. I mean, they don't directly pick out your clothes for you until you're able to do it yourself. And I'm not getting into a cyclical argument of how technically he is or she is or isn't, but literally, that's what a mom does. They take care of you. They help teach you how to be a person in a society and a system, whatever system that may be, to which that they know. So kind of a long explanation, but that, like I said, interesting correlation while doing the research for this that I kind of jumped to myself was
helped
her
you
explanation.
to identify with
Yep.
it. Yeah, fascinating cases. I obviously love diving into past life stories.
I know you seem to talk about it a lot.
I do. I think they're fascinating. I think there's a ton of information. People always say, well, why do I want to know about my past lives? But, you can learn so much from them. Problems, issues that you may be having in this life, you can go back and identify, okay, well, this is why I'm having this problem. This happened in a past life, and obviously I've held on to it through the whole dying and reincarnation process. Yeah. So, it can really help you to finally let go of that baggage and not carry it around with you. So, it's just fascinating.
Now, in your understanding of that situation, could you carry both good things and bad things?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then to one up that, is it consciously and subconsciously? And that's kind of the idea?
I think it's a little of both. And I think the more that you are willing to be open to that knowledge and explore it and look into it, I think that you can most definitely, uncover that knowledge that you need to uncover.
Benefit whether or not identifying the good or the bad, or the good and keeping it and the bad and removing it, but benefiting regardless in the recognition of it.
Yeah, and the good is going to be that knowledge that you've gained throughout these lives. So, it could be remembering that knowledge.
Yep.
That is going to be the key that's going to help you to move forward in this life.
And then hopefully into the next. Now I guess
letting go of that karma or that baggage so that you don't again carry it into your next life and then the next life after that and so on and so on.
Yeah. Yep. And that, logically, that makes sense. And I could totally agree with that. I can always be hopeful for one thing or another. And
because you even think about of course, I work with the paranormal and all of that. Yeah. So, you just think about how many, if it were a case of, say, someone is not happy for the choices they've made, whatever's happened in their life, and then they die while in that state of, anger at how their life turned out or because of circumstances that happened in their lives. So then do they then become, is that the reason that there are hauntings and the reason that we have ghosts is because that baggage just gets carried over and isn't released. So then the soul just kind of gets lost.
Yeah, it's kind of too much to go forward
and then
with.
You just kind of
now, do you think there's
down.
a way in which you could help that soul, that spirit, to release that baggage? First, question one.
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
I think for sure, yeah.
Segueing into question two, once that baggage is released and that soul has been helped to whatever point it needs to be helped at, do you think that then they translate to the next life? Is that how that works?
I think it acts just.
What does moving on mean to you?
To me, moving on means to do whatever, probably, to return to source, first of all. To, as Courtney Prosko, claimed in about her experiences, is just returning to source and taking that time to kind of breathe and just relax and chill for a little bit.
Yeah.
Gaining your strength back and figuring out, okay, what's our next move?
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to learn from our next life?
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to be in our family? But then, I think our lives are just, these many different lives are just about gathering knowledge that is going to benefit us in our next life, going to possibly benefit the people that are going to be interacting with us in our next life.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just a knowledge game.
Yeah.
And I think collectively, all the knowledge that every single soul gathers is stored in, some people call it the Akashic Records, but just some type of collective universal knowledge data bank.
For everybody to access.
Exactly. And tap into, if you are allowing yourself to tap into that. But some people, they just, due to religious indoctrination or whatever the case may be, just put that wall up and, don't want to dive into that or explore that. It doesn't fit into their...
And using that as an example and giving what is due to that theory, that idea, and that belief, it's not going to help you doing that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I consciously like the idea as a whole, just because it's not alienating, other than the fact of getting someone to realize, hey, you need to open up. You need to accept what is good and what's bad. I mean, it's doing you no good to block it off, to say that everything is physical, everything is here and done, and that's not doing you justice.
No.
Even if, and again, I'm not a part of this belief. Okay, I'm not going to say that I'm not bashing it like I previously said.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me, and I like how it is very inclusive. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If that's the word I want to use with, to everybody, let's not point out, individual downfalls, other than the fact that you need to figure out what your downfall is for you, not for anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the long term. And that's why I can really get on board with this, in this discussion, is because of that. It's not being exclusive. It's not saying, any definite things are wrong. It's saying that you need to figure out what you are doing right. What are you doing wrong? What feelings, and even beyond what you're doing right or wrong, I guess now that I think about it, what is happening? What are you learning? What are you gaining? And what are you losing?
Exactly.
And that's the ultimate point of it, really.
Yeah.
Of the idea, unless I'm
learning,
mistaken.
Growing, and most importantly, not carrying that baggage with you.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of whether you're talking about carrying baggage from life to life, just carrying baggage through one life.
Yeah.
When you know how it is when you go through something and you just want to hang on to that emotion, and sometimes that's not the healthiest thing to do.
For a myriad of reasons. I mean.
Yeah, and just carrying that with you, why let it go? Don't carry that baggage around with you. Certainly not in just this life, but throughout multiple lives.
I can agree to that. I mean, let it go, man.
Let it go. Let it go, man.
All right. Do you have anything else for today?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Sounds good. So that about wraps it up for today. And we'll go ahead and call her a day.
We'd like to say thank you one more time for hopping on board with us this week. If you have any comments, questions, critiques, or suggestions for new topics, please send us an email at supernaturaltendentiespodcast@gmail.com. We also encourage you to go over to our Facebook page at Supernatural Tendencies Podcast, and go ahead and just smash that like button if you would. We are also available on Instagram if that's more to your liking. Please pass us around to your friends as well, where they can find us on Podbean, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and most other major podcast platforms.
And remember, if you're having any type of paranormal activity or extraterrestrial contact, I offer private coaching online via Skype or Facebook Messenger to assist you with those issues. Feel free to visit me at ChristyJohnsonSadler.com for contact information.
Till next time, this has been Alex.
And Christy.
See you later.